Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Tuba People TV, where we talk about Arnold Jacobs all of the time. Puddles has put on his safety gear and ventured up here to the campus of University of Washington for where the Huskies are. So when we're outside on campus, we have them zipped up to avoid any mauling by the Huskies.
That's right.
But we're so delighted to be here in Seattle at University of Washington with Tim Saltzman. Thank you so much for
my pleasure.
For agreeing to let us come in and interview
Sure.
you. I was recently having a conversation over the summer with Louis Norfleet and telling him about this project, and he said, "Oh, you should go talk to Tim Saltzman. He studied with Jacobs." And I said, "He did? I didn't know that." So contacted you, and long story short, here we are. But 30 plus years here, director of concert bands at University of Washington. Prior to that, Montana State University, where you started the MSU Wind Ensemble.
Yeah.
And then 5 years as a high school band director in Illinois.
Right.
But prior to that, you had some studies with Mr. Jacobs.
I did.
I'm wondering what do you recall from your first initial set of lessons with Mr. Jacobs?
I recall being very nervous, and but immediately put at rest by his manner and his. Was a great human being. People ask me about him personally a lot, and that's one of the main things I always go to. He's just one of the most humble, most caring people I've ever met. I was always impressed by the fact that he knew everyone the second he met them and never forgot their name. I saw him once at a Midwest Band Clinic where there's all these exhibitors on the main exhibition floor, and everyone was gathered around him and talking to him, and just one person after another, and I hadn't seen him in 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Instantly, he knew who I was and asked me about the kids and everything. He just was like that. He had an encyclopedic memory for things that was. I wonder if he had like perfect recall from time to time. It was, but I do remember just being overwhelmed by information and transformed by it, and realizing that it was something that was going to take time to put into practice. So I would go down and get in my car in the Grant Park parking garage, and I had a legal pad, and I would just write down everything I could remember, everything I could possibly think of that I thought he said. And sometimes I would take that back with me into the lessons and say, I think at the last lesson you said this, and I tried it and it didn't work out or whatever, and he was super helpful that way. So I was able to sort of refine that written narrative, which kind of helped me put it into play a little bit quicker. I remember practicing a lot because I wanted to make sure that it was time well spent, because I felt like he was doing me a favor. He wasn't technically on our faculty.
Right. At Wheaton. You were at Wheaton
College, right, at the small Christian school I was going to. But the school agreed to allow him and others in the CSO brass section specifically to teach some of our music majors. I didn't want to mess that opportunity up, and I paid the extra money that it took, which at the time was like an enormous $35 or something like that. And it was, of course, the best money that I ever spent. But it was transformative, and I told you the main thing, the initial thing, was just getting me comfortable with the instrument in the chair. Just being able to become, I hate to use this word because he wouldn't say this, but to sort of become one with the instrument, and that the instrument was a mirror of what I was thinking, as opposed to pushing me around so much and contorting me.
Yeah.
He really helped me sort of align my body in a way that was so much more natural and made playing a much easier exercise. So
so how did he do that? What did you look like when you showed up at his studio, and what did he do to get you to be more ergonomically interactive?
Yeah. I think that, and I think this is true with a lot of young tuba players, that we grow as we play, and for some of us, the trunk of our body is too short or too long or whatever, especially the ones that are too long, and we come over to the instrument more to play it. And I think part of that is just the desire to try to hold that sucker and keep it from getting away from us.
Right.
And so what that does is it messes up both sort of the angle of our approach to the instrument, as well as the spine and the specifically sort of the lumbar region of the spine, to make sure that lumbar arch is existent in order for our lungs to hang free in our body. He was all over me about that. And I was finally able to play full phrases, essentially, once that was kind of worked out. And then the position of your head, so that there's relaxation and openness sort of in the trachea area, so you're not, because I think I was kind of coming over to the instrument a lot, trying to hold it and sort of coddle it,
So posture was a big part of that.
Initially, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And did you notice when your posture? What did you notice when your posture got better? What did you notice about your playing? Longer phrases, anything else?
Longer phrases, the ability to articulate clearer. I think that air is and speed of air is essential to all of that. And again, if you're sort of holding onto the instrument and compressing your body, that's going to diminish big time too. So.
Tim, so posture was a big thing in your initial lessons. Did he have you sing or play the mouthpiece? What else did you do?
Yeah, 50% of my time in lessons was either singing or playing the mouthpiece. It just was, because he was very, very interested in trying to sculpt an image of sound in my mind, as opposed to me kind of counting on the horn to play itself. And that's influenced me ever since then. The notion of music being made from the inside out as opposed to from the outside in. I think that we have a tendency to always get equipment obsessed. We never have an expensive enough instrument. The mouthpiece is never quite right. It'll articulate clearly in the top end of the horn, but it won't make the low notes sound the way they should. So we're very conscious of equipment. I'm a golfer, and it's kind of the same thing with golf. Mm-hmm. I have to have the latest driver to hit it as far as my buddies.
Right.
And I can always hear Mr. Jacobs laughing at me in the golf stores. Because it's not about the equipment. It's not the stick. It's not the equipment. It's what it is that you're doing here. Because can I tell a story about it real quick that way?
Absolutely.
I had, when I first started studying with him, I had a little quintet horn that was like a 3/4 horn. And so I took that into a lesson, and I said to him, Mr. Jacobs, this is a humbling story to tell. Mr. Jacobs, my high A just is not secure. It's just wobbly. And I've tried third valve by itself and this and that and the other thing. It's just not working. And it's sharp. And I just am frustrated. And I think I was working on Hindemith or something at the time.
For the cadenza.
For the cadenza.
Yeah.
So he didn't say anything to me. It was such a beautiful moment. He just kind of holds out his arms like, give me your baby. So I hand him my horn. So he played high A, super soft, super loud, from 2 octaves down, from wherever, how many octaves up, with double tongue up to it, come down. Then he put the mouthpiece on the side of his embouchure like this, did the same thing. Put the mouthpiece over here, did the same thing.
Oh my God.
Then, because it was a 3/4 horn, he turned it upside down, and he played it with his left hand, and did the same thing, and didn't say a word the whole time, just kept doing all this stuff for like 3 or 4 minutes. Then he put the horn back in my lap. He said, "It's not the horn, son." So that lesson I have never forgotten, and I have told that story 100,000 times, because nowadays, boy oh boy, especially affluent kids that come from entitled backgrounds, they think if I get the $70,000 Miramatsu flute, I'm going to be there. But the truth is that somebody could take a Bundy flute, who has a notion of what a flute ought to sound like, and make it sound incredible. Yeah. So,
exactly right.
That he was really good. He was really good at letting the 21-year-old me come in and sort of tie the rope around my neck, and then just kind of, I would yammer for a while. Yeah. Then he'd just kind of kick this chair out from under me and watch me hang.
Yeah.
I just never forget that.
Yeah.
It was so humbling.
I had a similar experience, not quite as in depth, but I was bemoaning some note.
Yeah.
On my tuba.
Yeah,
He said, "Oh, really? Oh, let me have your tuba."
Right.
He played it. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. It's not the tuba. It's the player."
Right, exactly. And the whole notion of the imaging of the sound. I remember he would play next to me every once in a while, depending on what the orchestra was doing and stuff. And we were playing something, and I played a little bit, then he played a little bit, and then I played a little bit, and I thought to myself, my 21-year-old self, wow, I just put that better than Arnold Jacobs. Wow, But we're in a studio like this
Yeah,
size. Then I'd go hear the Chicago Symphony. I didn't sound like Arnold Jacobs, like ever in my life, just because he had a notion of what that room should sound like.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so he didn't just image the sound of a tuba absent of an ambient environment. That was my takeaway from there. He imaged what the sound of a tuba should be like when you're playing pictures at an exhibition in Orchestra Hall in Chicago. And nobody sounded like that in an orchestra. I don't think that I've ever heard to this day. Just the way it sounded like an organ, just so sustained and so in tune and so resonant and so linear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was amazing to hear. So,
Yeah, it really was.
yeah.
So, Tim, when we were discussing the shape of this interview, I remember you telling me about the Arbin studies and,
Oh, yeah, boy.
and the words. Would you recount
Yeah,
that?
he was intent, really intent on again trying to develop my imagination, because I was a completely unimaginative tuba player. I was a pianist at the same time. I think I had a little bit more imagination for piano because there were multiple notes. It's easy to imagine it.
Right.
But the single line thing, for whatever reason, I just didn't have the soul of an artist singing. I just didn't have it. So he made me play an Arbin's crawling third exercise, slowly. He said, okay, play that. So I played it. He goes, great, let's sing it. So I sang it just on a neutral syllable, like oh or ah or something. He goes, no, sing the words. And I was like, what words? He said, I don't know, you tell me, what words? So I went back to school that week and practiced and wrote out words after I covered the practice room window with paper so no one could see what I was doing and who was making all those terrible noises. Go back to my next lesson a week or two later, sang the thing for him, as humiliating as it was. I sang it. He goes, wow, that's great. What's the second verse? And I spent literally nearly a year, having to develop words to this song and a story to this song. And that's a lesson I've never ever forgotten about music. And it's transferred directly, if it's okay if I go into this, into my teaching of conductors here. A lot of times the conductors want to know how to make a pretty four pattern or how to conduct 7/8 time or something like that. But that's not it. What is it is the narrative, the line in the music, the architecture of the music, and the story that it tells. And I'm not talking about programmatic music. I'm talking about tension and release and the development of phrasing. So I'll make them sing line by line. And I also like to make them sing the score as they're conducting it, what is important to them. They have to sing it to me with words. So there's actually dialogue with the parts. Now, obviously, they're uniphonic. They're not polyphonic in their voice, but it helps me to know where their attention is going and how they've developed their imagination for those parts as they sort of are set against each other and interactive with each other, what the dialogue is. I owe all of that to him, all of that, because he would talk, about the Hindenburg Symphony, or sonata rather, about the dialogue with it, because it's a piano concerto. I mean, let's face facts. And my pianist was in tears. I don't know about yours, but about that dialogue and who's saying what, when, and where, and how we have to supply that to the music, even though we can't see it. And we don't even know that Hindemith ever really thought that.
Yeah.
We still have to bring that to bear on the music. Otherwise, it's just another sterile, realized ambition of notes. It's nothing beyond that. So,
Right.
yeah.
It's style.
Right.
So the singing and the buzzing of the mouthpiece, I mean, it's style.
It's
He
everything.
was wanting to get you to become stylistically interesting.
Exactly. He wanted me to have a voice.
Yeah.
You go hear opera singers, and you like such and such an opera singer because she's got a particular way that she colors Wagner and does things with whatever, and the next one does something else with Baroque opera or whatever. Trying to get you to become a distinctive artist. That's the thing that I took away. I think wasn't it Herseth that said that if he was a violinist, he would have been Heifetz? I think it was Herseth that said that. I can't remember, but that's really true. I mean,
Jacobs would have been.
Jacobs.
Yeah.
That was his artistic soul. Was he had a very particular and idiosyncratic and beautiful way to tell each story because he thought about it.
Yeah, and every note had meaning.
It did. There's no throwaway
There were no
notes.
throwaway. You play a C major scale.
Right.
It was the most beautiful thing you'd ever heard.
Right.
It's amazing.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah, so it sounds like, and that's what you're trying to get across with your students is not just to be a stick waver, but to be a communicator.
Right. Right.
And to bring something in that communication to bear.
Right. And that becomes interesting with the group. Very interesting, because then you have all these individual voices that have to make a unified presentation of what the narrative is, an agreed to unified interpretation of what the music is, knowing their role in every context, when to step to the fore, when to recede, when to be color, when to be predominant, what to do. There's no end to that. There's no end to that. I mean, you could do the same piece of music 50,000 different ways in that respect. But to create an ensemble that has artistic, unified, flexible voicing like that, that's a trick, and that takes a long time. That's why I'm excited about our tour coming up, because you can't, in academia that's hard, because you practice music for a long time, you go out and you do it one time, and you put it away. That's a tragedy. I mean, the pro orchestras don't do that.
Right.
You know, they get usually at least 3 shots on something, right? And that lets the piece sort of become what it's going to be with the particular individuals that are sitting there and what they're going to bring to bear on it.
Yeah.
As opposed to let's survive this first performance.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah, the repetitious nature of those concerts is you learn so much.
Exactly.
As an ensemble.
Yeah. I mean, I hate the fact that I have to drag my ensemble halfway around the world to do this, but that I've told them that's my favorite thing about tour, is we get to play music over and over again. And the group just does this. And they do things on tour they would never do here. And it's because they're arriving at a unified narrative.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. They're not just playing better. That's not it. I mean, you could play better. You could play more in tune one night to the next, but it may not be nearly as meaningful artistically.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work like that. He taught me that.
Yeah.
He taught me to let go of the details and the obsession about the perfection.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that's an important thing to say about Mr. Jacobs. He was great at breaking down perfectionism, I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of musicians are sort of obsessive compulsive types.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be able to be the clearest articulator, right, and the most in tune player, or the loudest, or whatever. Yeah. And he was great at saying that, you know, none of that stuff matters. It's about the art. It's about the art. So, and what you've imaged.
And also, just along with that perfectionism goes self-analyzation while you're doing it.
Exactly.
And that leads to lots of disaster.
Oh gosh, that's happened to me so much on the podium. Not so much anymore, but gosh, in the old days, you know, you go past letter B and you get to letter C, and I'd be thinking, I should have said this to them about letter B.
Yeah.
That's why that happened. Yeah. And the second you do that, you're not in the moment anymore.
Right.
You're not in the moment. Michael Colgrass calls it a new now. I love that. You know, a new now. And he was great about that.
Yeah.
What happens. People will never remember it. They'll never remember the flub if it's a part of the narrative.
Yeah.
And in fact, it makes you more human.
Yeah.
You know, he helped me with that. It makes you more human, and therefore, the audience is they feel more sense of endearing kind of spirit with you when they sense your humanity, as opposed to tossing off something that's perfect. Yeah. You know?
Absolutely.
So, I think that was a really important part of my time with him.
I think that whole idea of being the new now with Jacobs, he got that from his training at Curtis with tabby-toe and microphrasing, that sort of thing, and just being really in the moment, training himself to be in the moment.
Right.
Every note sounds great.
Right. Yeah.
Tim, I remember you mentioning earlier that you went into a studio at Fine Arts Building, and of course you noticed all of the various gadgets and machines and Christmas tree light things and oscilloscopes, and did he have you working with any of those things?
No, not one time. Not in the 2 years I was there. And a year into it, I asked him, so when do I get hooked up to all this stuff? And he said, Tim, you don't really have problems that way. And I said, oh, Well, I thought like everybody got measured and all that sort of thing, and because I'd heard all the stories. He said, it's not really your problem. And he said to me in a moment of kind of vulnerable candor, people come here from like halfway around the world and they expect this, and so I kind of feel obligated,
Right.
which I thought was pretty funny. Although I do know from personal accounts of friends and stuff through the years that those machines were used to help them a lot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they're very good incentive. They take your attention off what you're
yeah,
trying to do analysis-wise and put it on a goal, a
right,
product.
Right, right.
You know, blow a ball up or make the oscilloscope do this, or
Right.
light a certain number of Christmas tree lights on the post.
I had to do that in a physical a couple of years ago. I had to blow the ball up the thing.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing it, Jacob's, and I'm like, oh, good, I finally get to do it. And I don't think I did it very well, actually. So anyhow, it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, I mean, I think that just it more or less reinforces what I've discovered with his project is that he didn't teach a method. He taught the individual.
Yeah.
And he taught you based on your needs
Yeah.
as an individual and
Yeah.
what he perceived as what you needed to do or accomplish or work with or be directed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And that for me was the musical imagination, the narrative in the music, finding meaning, the constructed inherent meaning, getting behind that and making it your own.
Mhm.
And not, the other thing I like about that, working with the solo rep and stuff with him and the excerpts and whatnot, was that it wasn't your narrative, like I'm going to redefine Berlioz or whatever. It was, this is the narrative of the music that we should adhere to. Now, how do you personalize that to the point where you own it in a confident way? And I think that the singing really helped with that, the imaging. Because the horn, what he taught me is the horn will do whatever you're thinking it's going to do. You can, as he proved to me very
Mhm.
dramatically, you can push down wrong buttons and get the right sounds.
Right.
And boy, he was good at that. He was good at the humility factor.
yes, subtle
Yeah.
humility, maybe ranging to gross humility.
Yeah, but he always, and I've always taken his lead when working with young people, which is what I do, of course, because I was 21, and when you're 21, as I say here all the time, you know everything. It's a beautiful time of life, and every year that's passed since then, I've forgotten all that stuff. But I remember I watched the orchestra once at Ravinia, and they played the Rite of Spring. And I had never heard the Rite of Spring live. Being a farm boy from the Midwest, I had never heard it live. And it was a notable performance because it was Lawrence Foster, I think, was conducting, and he lost his stick, and his stick went all the way through the air. So, but anyway, I had a lesson the next day, and I went into the lesson and I said, "Oh, Mr. Jacobs, I heard the Rite of Spring, and it was so primal, and it was so moving, and this part was this, and this part had so much angst, and I'm just." And again, he's just letting me do this. He said to me, "Do you like that piece of crap?" That's what he said to me. And I about swallowed my tongue. He said, "You like that?" He said, "That's the worst this orchestra has ever played that piece." He was fuming.
Wow.
He was fuming.
Wow.
So, speaking of the imagination and whatnot, his and maybe the orchestra's imagination of what that piece was and the way it turned out that particular day were quite definitely two different things, unbeknownst to me. But that's where I was in the artistic journey. I was nowhere.
Yeah.
So.
Speaking of pieces of crap, you studied with him in '76 and '77. That was around the time that he recorded the Von Williams Tuba Concerto
Right.
with CSO. I think they were on tour in Europe at the time, and I remember my own experience starting in '81 with him. He was still pretty upset
Yeah.
about that. What do you? He
was very upset, and I asked him because I was excited, to hear what I was certain was going to be the definitive version of the Von Williams Tuba Concerto, played by my teacher, who I so deeply revered. And he said, "Oh, Tim, please don't buy that." I mean, first thing out of his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked to me about, if I'm remembering correctly, microphone placement being problematic and not having enough time, and the knob twisters kind of going nuts with the balance stuff.
Right.
And he didn't like the way the horn sounded. Everything about it was very off-putting to him.
Yeah.
Which made me really sad. It made me really sad.
Yeah, because it really put him in a bad position.
Yeah, and if anybody can play that piece of music, he can. are good. So for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a sad thing. So I didn't buy it. I've never heard it. It's the way I honor him.
Really?
Yes,
No
it's the way I
kidding.
honor him. Absolutely.
Well,
I did what he told me to do, and I'm going to do that too. So
there's actually a radio broadcast that was released as a CSO Radiothon Premium CD, and I'll get you a copy of that so you
Okay.
can hear that. That was a good one.
it's a different performance.
It's a different performance.
Oh,
It's
great.
with Henry Mazer, Chicago Symphony Orchestra Hall, whereas the one that he didn't want you to buy was with Barenboim
Right.
and the CSO in the mid-70s and
Right.
Deutsche Grammophon. So
Right.
I'll make sure you get a copy of that.
Right.
And you too, Derek.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I think just to wrap this up, I'd love to fast forward. One of the things that Tim and I talked about in our messaging back and forth as we were discussing this time was your how you brought what you learned from Jacobs to the podium.
Yeah.
And you talked about it initially with the breathing, the posture.
Right.
And I'd love if there's anything more that you want to talk about, and also just working with conductors. So
Right. Sure. So given the fact that I'm a wind ensemble conductor, I live in sort of two worlds, kind of the I don't know how else to describe it, sort of the art music world, and then the developing educational band world too, where kids, school kids and whatnot, because I have a lot of contact with school band directors and train them, and also train university wind ensemble conductors. And a lot of what we have to do in this country as a band director has everything to do with the pedagogy of playing a wind instrument and a percussion instrument from the podium. Whereas decades ago, so many kids in this country are taking private lessons. They're really not now like they used to. And they're starting in these mass band classes, and they develop set-in terrible problems that take years of remediation by good private teachers. So I try to interdict in that situation. Even like doing weekend honor bands or all-state bands or whatever, I always go through an outline of concepts, many of which were sort of born of my study with Mr. Jacobs about posture and how to sit in the chair in such a way that you can really bring air to bear on the situation. Because with a wind band, the hardest thing with a wind band is getting sound to sustain. That's number one. And that's completely driven by air and the ability to breathe. So I try to help kids with how to sit in the chair right, based upon my time with Mr. Jacobs. The position of their head, which has been contorted by the various instruments, flutes and trombone players and all the rest of it. Try to fix all that up. We talk a lot about the inner oral cavity, about embouchures, which are greatly and deeply affected, in my view, by poor posture. The way the instrument kind of, again, bringing the child over and screwing up like the ratio of upper lip to lower lip and how square the horn is on their face and all of that. So that's something that I do with every single group, because I think that it helps to unify the approach, and it frees the students up a lot to play more comfortably, and therefore to enjoy and get deeper into the art part. And obviously it's going to help the sound and the tuning of the band. So that's a huge part. I also, knew when I was studying with him, I had some aspirations that I wanted to be a band director. All I ever wanted to be was like a junior high or high school band director. That's all I ever wanted. It's a long story. I never applied for any of the jobs I got. It's a long story. But anyhow, so here I am, and that's all I wanted to do. So I would ask him questions about conductors, because I would go get rush tickets at Orchestra Hall,
yeah.
like at Thursday concerts.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of times I sat literally in the front row on the main floor,
Yeah.
just because I wanted to be close to the heat,
Mm-hmm.
And I could see everybody's socks basically,
Yeah.
and soloists, in fact I was sitting really close to Gary Grafman, who was playing Schumann concerto, and I'll never forget, because I knew the piece piano-wise a little
Right.
bit, not like I could play it great or anything, but I knew it, and he forgot some of it, and it was real interesting and a big life lesson, watching him cover that
Yeah.
until his memory came back,
Right.
which was a good 16 measures or so. It's pretty interesting.
Wow.
But that helped me, the perfectionism part. Like
Yeah.
guys like that have troubles too.
Exactly.
It was really great. But I would ask him about conductors. So one time, and he was not much for a lot of small talk, as you'll probably remember. But I said, so who's your favorite conductor? And he said, well, Schulte is really good for, Mahler and blah, blah, blah. And Barenboim is good for this. And he kind of went down the list and talked about different repertoire. In specific, it was neat. And that actually helped me because I went and, I'd buy recordings of these guys doing that specific repertoire.
Yeah.
Try to figure out what it was that he was into. But he said, but there's just no Fritz. There's no Fritz. Mm-hmm. He said he could do everything. And so from that moment in my life, I began to obsessively collect Reiner Chicago Symphony recordings for the interpretive mind that was at work there. And of course, my assumption or my conclusion is the same as his was from my, very amateur chair. He was right. He was right.
Yeah.
Interestingly, after I came here and we hired Dave Gordon, principal trumpet,
Yeah.
also a Reiner aficionado, collects all those recordings. They're stunning, especially when you think about how they made those recordings in those days and the product that's there.
And they're 60, 70 years old now.
And they're
Still
unbelievable. They're
standard
unbelievable.
setters.
Unbelievable. I listen to those things still to this day, all the time. So, that was very instructive to me, just as a model, who to follow. So, and then that wonderful, you've probably seen it, Great Conductors of the Past video came out 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I actually got to see him because I'd never gotten to see him.
Right.
And just a little tiny postage stamp beat,
Yep.
Which I'll do from time to time if the group gets away from me, which is what he used to do.
Right.
So, but he was an autocrat and overbearing and drove a lot of people to craziness. But Mr. Jacobs loved him.
Yeah, I think he really appreciated and loved his musicianship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So when you're working with your students, in terms of the posture, you work with your wind ensemble every year. You get them to create this sound, and you were telling us earlier about how on some of your trips to Asia, Japan, I think in particular, technically speaking, they've got such great achievements in their wind bands.
Yeah.
But they were really fascinated with the sound that you got with
Yes.
your wind ensemble.
Yeah.
And that has to do with the certainly the posture, I guess, is what you're.
Yeah, and the imaging, of course, but the posture and being open enough in your oral cavity.
Yeah.
So every day we play Bach chorales. We breathe, we do some breathing things. Then we play Bach chorales, and we always sing. I'll go over and just play the opening chord or whatever, and we'll sing the Bach chorale through. And the really curious thing to me, and I should document this somehow, but if I don't do that, it's very rare, and maybe it's the pressure of a performance or something like that, the group never sounds as good the entire rehearsal as they do if we take those 6-7 minutes to do that in the front. So I've learned that that's always time well spent, to recenter, to get back inside, to think about coming from the inside out, to image, to sing, to have the concept. And they do it willingly now because they know the result. That's desperately important to us. The association between song and wind. And I hate saying that because people talk about Jacob's song and wind, and it's so much more than that, as you know. But the song is critical.
Prima, he was the song.
He was the song guy.
Song master.
Yeah, for real. And he could sing. Do you have recordings of him singing at all?
I don't have any recordings of him, not from broadcast, but if you go back and hear, there are some there's some radio broadcasts of him talking, being interviewed in the 1950s, and he's got his announcer, his singing voice. It's very formal and it's very deep.
Yeah, he sounded like he was in the bottom of a rain barrel.
Yeah,
he sounded like Paul Robeson or one of those guys.
Right.
He had that kind of a resonant, deep, rich, baritone kind of voice, and I always wish that I had somehow recorded him singing, just because he lit me up that way.
Yeah.
He would sing part of the hymn sonata or whatever.
Right.
And it just lit me up. I mean, even more than him playing it in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I think again, it's because it's connecting you to the base, to the core, where it's generated.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, Tim, I can't thank you enough for making time to meet
Oh,
with
it's fun.
Pels and I. He says you're still number one, so
Yeah, we'll see.
we appreciate that. And we'd like to offer you, as a token of our appreciation, this collector's Tuba People TV glass
How
for your use.
my life will never be the same,
Well, we
and I'll put it to good use.
Very well.
Of that, you can be sure.
thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed this.
Nice to meet you.
Such a great opportunity to
Yeah.
get the more insight into Mr. Jacobs.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.
And now back to you.